When you think about diplomats who've really been constants on the world stage, through thick and thin, one name definitely comes to mind.
Oh, yeah. Someone who's seen it all, basically.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into Sergey Lavrov. He's Russia's foreign minister and has been for, well, a very long time. He's not just been watching history unfold, he's often been right there
Yeah.
shaping it, a key
Oh.
figure and clearly a dedicated Russian patriot in his approach.
Definitely. And for this, we've got quite a bit to draw on. We're looking at his big speeches, the UN, Munich Security Conference, G20 summits, lots there.
Right.
Plus his role in major events like the Iran nuclear deal, the Syria negotiations. It's a long list. We'll also look at different takes on him, his background, some anecdotes that maybe show a different side, and what people see as his big diplomatic wins.
So our mission here really is to try and understand the core elements of his diplomacy, what drives it. It seems to consistently come back to Russian sovereignty, security, and global influence, right?
That seems to be the thread, yes.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where did it all start? What were those early experiences that, set the stage for him?
Well, his early career definitely laid the groundwork. He went to MGIMO, the Moscow State Institute of International Relations, which is like the place for training Russian diplomats. That gave him the foundation.
Right.
And his first posting was, interestingly enough, Sri Lanka. And it wasn't just a quick stop. He actually became fluent in Sinhala.
Really? Sinhala.
Yeah, which suggests, an early knack for engaging with different cultures, maybe beyond just the usual great power politics focus. These first steps probably really cemented that sense of defending Russia's interests out there in a complex world.
Hmm. So from Sri Lanka onwards, you see this dedication taking shape, defending Russia's right to, well, do its own thing. How has that played out over the years? Because this is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Defending sovereignty is probably the central theme. You see it consistently in his stance on Russia making its own calls, especially with big events like the annexation of Crimea or the whole situation in Ukraine. Right.
And he's always been very critical of what he calls Western interference. You hear it year after year in his UN General Assembly speeches, going way back to 2004. He's constantly hitting that note. Remember that 2022 quote? The West is playing with fire by pumping Ukraine with weapons. That's pure Lavrov on this theme.
And it's not just about criticism, is it? It's also about building alternatives.
Exactly. It's proactive, too. He is a huge advocate for a multipolar world. So he puts a lot of energy into strengthening ties with countries like China, India, through BRICS and the SKO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
Ah, yes. BRICS and SKO.
Yeah, it's a very deliberate strategy to build up these non-Western partnerships, sort of counterbalance U.S. influence, create a different kind of global balance.
Let's talk about some of those key diplomatic moments, the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA that often comes up. What does his role there tell us about his approach?
Well, the Iran deal is interesting because his role in getting that done between, say, 2013 and 2015 really showed a capacity for pragmatic diplomacy. He was at the table with the U.S., the EU, China, often countries with very different goals, but managed to find enough common ground. Things like how a verification would work. It showed a certain flexibility, maybe, that you don't always associate with his more recent confrontational style. It proved cooperation was possible, even with big disagreements hanging in the air.
Then there's Syria, a completely different challenge, much longer, much more fraught. How has he managed Russia's position there?
Syria, yeah, that's been a long haul. He's basically been the main diplomatic defender of the Assad regime on the world stage through countless talks. It's a very firm stance, and it's been key to Russia maintaining its strategic presence in the Middle East.
A crucial region for them.
Absolutely. It shows their commitment to allies, right or wrong in others' eyes, and their determination to project power there.
And Crimea in 2014, that was a huge international flashpoint.
Wait,
What was Lavrov's diplomatic role after that?
after the annexation, he really led the diplomatic charge to frame it as a reunification. The argument was about the will of the people there. Now, that view didn't get much traction internationally.
Not at all.
No. But his diplomatic work definitely shaped the narrative from Russia's perspective and sort of managed the immediate fallout in a way. It showed Russia was willing to act decisively for what it sees as its vital interests and the protection of ethnic Russians.
You mentioned BRICS and the SPO earlier. Did events like Crimea make strengthening those connections even more important for him?
That's a really good point. Yes, I think after things like Crimea and the Western reaction, focusing on BRICS and the STO became even more vital. It was a way to, diversify relationships, avoid potential isolation.
Makes sense.
So his efforts in those groups have been central to building this alternative non-Western bloc, trying to shift the global balance, reduce dependence on U.S.-led systems. It's been a constant in his strategy.
And even quite recently, his 2023 tour of Africa got a lot of attention. What was the main goal there?
That Africa tour was pretty clearly about expanding Russian influence on the continent. The focus was on things like military cooperation, trade, and significantly talks about food security, especially with the issues around the Black Sea grain deal.
Right. Food security became a big lever.
Exactly. It's a strategic push to build new partnerships, boost Russia's image, especially when facing Western sanctions, finding allies in a multipolar world.
Now, Lavrov is known for his style.
Yeah.
Very direct, often quite sharp. That quote from Munich in 2015, "We are not looking for confrontation, but we will not tolerate being dictated to." That really sums it up, doesn't it?
It really does. That quote captures his style perfectly. He's known for being sharp, witty, sometimes bitingly so, and just very direct. His UNGA speeches are legendary for their critiques of NATO and laying out Russian policy.
No punches pulled.
None. And even at that really tense G20 summit in Bali in 2022, walking out of some sessions, holding his own press conferences, it all underlined Russia's determination not to back down on what they see as core principles.
It feels like this directness isn't just, rhetoric for its own sake. There's a real consistency in the themes he hammers home.
Absolutely, that's the key thing. Over his whole career, these themes, sovereignty, multipolarity, non-intervention, they just keep coming back again and again. That strategic consistency over such a long time is, well, it's quite remarkable. It shows a deep belief in those principles for Russia and the world.
We've talked a lot about the public figure, but I'm curious about the person. There's some famous anecdotes like the Lavrov smile. What do those moments tell us?
Ah, yes, the Lavrov smile. That moment with Hillary Clinton back in '09, she asked about Russia's position, and he just gives this wry smile and says something like, "We were waiting for you to get us your answer." It was classic Lavrov dry wit, sharp edge, even in serious talks.
A bit disarming, perhaps.
Maybe. Or just showing he wouldn't be pushed. Then there was the tennis banter with John Kerry suggesting a doubles match to find the real diplomat. Little glimpses of a personality that's clearly very sharp, but also has this subtle, sometimes quite sardonic sense of humor.
And beyond the wit, any moments that showed maybe a deeper, more emotional side regarding Russia?
Well, his comments after the Crimea annexation in 2014 were quite strong, saying Russia will always defend its people and its values, even if the world opposes it. That sounded like deep patriotism. Even small things, like the yarn incident at the UN in 2018.
Oh, I remember that mock knitting.
Yeah, mock knitting because he felt the questions were repetitive. It showed poise, maybe a bit of theatricality, and things like his known love for classical music, Tchaikovsky apparently, or his running joke with journalists about predictable questions. They add layers. And then there's that infamous pussies comment in 2016.
Right, that caused a stir.
It did. But the context he gave was that it was a blunt, unfiltered critique of what he saw as the chaotic nature of the U.S. election then. It just shows his very direct, sometimes abrasive way of saying exactly what he thinks about global politics.
It's clear he's viewed very differently depending on who you ask. What are the main contrasting takes on him as a diplomat?
Yeah, the views are poles apart, really. From a Western viewpoint, he's often seen as, a master of disinformation, skillfully defending policies many see as aggressive or breaking international rules. The criticism is that he serves narrow Russian interests above all else.
Okay.
But from a Russian perspective, or even some neutral ones, he's seen as this principled, effective defender of a multipolar world. Someone pushing back against perceived Western dominance, standing up for Russia's place. They praise his consistency, his refusal to bow to pressure. The criticisms about Ukraine or Syria are often countered by arguing he's just defending Russia's security against threats.
So you have these two narratives. Cynical operator versus principled strategist.
Pretty much. Disinformation agent versus defender of multipolarity. It depends entirely on your starting point.
Let's zoom in on that 2022 UN speech. That was a really significant moment. What were his key arguments then, justifying the invasion of Ukraine?
That speech was crucial. A big part was justifying the special military operation. He argued Russia basically had no choice. He claimed the West wouldn't engage seriously and that Ukraine's actions after the 2014 bloody coup, as he called it, threatened Russia and Russian speakers.
The no-choice argument.
Yes. And he explicitly said any sovereign state, any self-respecting state would have done the same thing in Russia's position. That was his core justification.
He also talked about those referenda in Donbass,
Yeah.
right, which were widely condemned.
He did. He basically brushed off the Western criticism as hypocrisy. He framed it as the people there exercising self-determination because they felt persecuted by Kyiv. And he broadened the attack, accusing the West of undermining international institutions, trying to create its own rules-based order using illegal unilateral sanctions as a weapon.
So it was a wide-ranging critique of the West.
Very much so. He accused the U.S. of spreading disinformation, crude staging, and provocations. He even tied in economic complaints like Western mismanagement during COVID and the sanctions being an economic war. He mentioned the grain deal, but claimed it wasn't helping the poorest and that Russian exports were still blocked.
And the Russophobia theme was prominent, too.
Hugely prominent. He claimed the West's real goal wasn't just helping Ukraine, but the military defeat and even the destruction and fracture of Russia itself, to get rid of an all-too-independent player, as he put it.
How did he wrap up that speech? I remember a reference to a past UN figure.
Yes, he quoted Dag Hammarskjöld, the former UN Secretary General, about the UN's purpose being to save humanity from war. He called for political will to create peace. And his final point was about returning to the UN Charter's roots diplomacy, based on the sovereign equality of states.
So after going through all this deep dive, what are the main takeaways? What really defines Lavrov's long run as Russia's top diplomat?
Well, I think it comes down to that unwavering commitment to Russia's national interests, as he sees them sovereignty, security, and this relentless push for a multipolar world. His sheer longevity in the role, his constant presence on the global stage, it really speaks to his influence, whether you agree with him or not.
He's certainly a figure who provokes strong reactions, very polarizing. Which makes me wonder, looking back at his decades of service, his consistent messaging, how will history judge his overall impact on global politics, on Russia's place in the world?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Or maybe, thinking about those starkly different views of him we discussed, what does that contrast tell us about the fundamental disagreements, the deep fractures that are shaping international relations right now?